Dewey, John. He was born on October the 20th, 1859, in Burlington, Vermont. He received his BA from the University of Vermont in 1879, and he taught secondary school in Vermont and Pennsylvania before entering the Johns Hopkins Graduate School, where he received his PhD, 1884. He instructed in philosophy at the University of Michigan from 1884 to 1894, except for 1 year as visiting professor of philosophy, University of Minnesota, 1888 to 9. He was head of the Department of Philosophy, Psychology and Education at the University of Chicago, 1894 to 1904. In 1896, he established his University of Chicago Laboratory School for Progressive Education. This school soon included 23 instructors, 10 assistants, and 140 experimental students. He was professor of philosophy at Columbia University from 1904 to 1930. He visited the Soviet Union in 1928, and he returned impressed with the Marxist experiment in Russia. In 1937, he conducted a famous mission to Mexico with respect to Leon Trotsky. He died in New York City on June 1, 1952. Psychology, New York, Harper, 1886, 427 pages. Second edition, 1887. Third edition, 1891. My Pedagogic Creed, Washington, D.C., Progressive Education Association, 1897. Second edition, 1929. The School and Society, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1899, 125 pages. First Revised Edition, 1900, 129 pages. Second Revised Edition, 1915, 164 pages. The Educational Situation, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1902, 104 pages. The Child and the Curriculum, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1902, 40 pages. Ethical Principles Underlying Education, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1903, 34 pages. Second edition, 1908. Moral Principles in Education, New York Philosophical Library, 1959. Original edition, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1909, 60 pages. Educational Essays, London, Blackie & Son, 1910, 168 pages. The Influence of Darwin on Philosophy and Other Essays in Contemporary Thought, New York, Henry Holt, 1910, 300 pages. Interest and Effort in Education, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1913, 101 pages. The Schools of Tomorrow, with Evelyn Dewey, New York, Dutton, 1915, 316 pages. German Philosophy and Politics, New York, Henry Holt, 1915, 134 pages. Democracy and Education, An Introduction to the Philosophy of Education, New York, Macmillan, 1916, 434 pages. Second edition, 1923. Third edition, 1929. Human Nature and Conduct, An Introduction to Social Psychology, New York, Henry Holt, 1922, 336 pages. The Public and Its Problems, New York, Henry Holt, 1927, 224 pages. Second edition, New York, Minton Balk, 1930. Characters and Events, Popular Essays in Social and Political Philosophy, 2 volumes, New York, Henry Holt, 1929. New Republic, 1929, 270 pages. Second edition, 1932. The Sources of a Science of Education, New York, Liverlight, 1929, 77 pages. Individualism, Old and New, New York, Minton Balk, 1930, 171 pages. Philosophy and Civilization, New York, Minton, Belk, 1931, 334 pages. American Education, Past and Future, Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1931, 14 pages. The Way Out of Educational Confusion, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard University Press, 1931, 41 pages. A Common Faith, New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University Press, 1934, 87 pages. Education and the Social Order, New York, League for Industrial Democracy, 1934, 14 pages. Art as Experience, New York, Minton, Belk, 1934, 355 pages. Liberalism and Social Action, New York, Putnam, 1935, 93 pages. Experience and Education, New York, Macmillan, 1938, 116 pages, second edition, 1948. Intelligence in the Modern World, New York, Modern Library, 1939, 1077 pages. Freedom and Culture, New York, Putnam, 1939, 176 pages. Problems of Men, New York, Philosophical Library, 1946. Dunham, Wallace Brett. Lawyer and university administrator, his book on education in 1944 was regarded at Harvard as an advanced descent from the famous Aristotelian Harvard Report on Education in a Free Society, directed by Professor Demos and published the following year. Dunham urged a return to the earlier traditions of American individualism. He was born on October the 26th, 1877, in Rockland, Massachusetts. He received his A.B. from Harvard in 1898 and his LL.B. there in 1901. After admission to the bar that year, he served in the legal department of the Old Colony Trust Company from 1901 to 1919, and he was vice president 1906 to 19. From 1919 to 1942, he was dean of the Graduate School of Business at Harvard, where he was also professor of public administration from 1942 to 1948. He was visiting professor of human relations, Colgate University, 1948 and 9, and from 1950 to 1954, he was managing director of the Harvard Yenching Institute. He died at Cambridge, Massachusetts on November the 29th, 1954. His son Richard Dunham is Dean of the School of Business at Northwestern University. Business Adrift, New York, McGraw-Hill, 1931, 165 pages. Business Looks at the Unforeseen, New York, McGraw-Hill, 1932, 209 pages. National Ideals and International Idols, address March 29, 1933, New York, Chemical Foundation Incorporated, 1933, 19 pages. Education for Responsible Living, The Opportunity for Liberal Arts College, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard University Press, 1944. E.B. Frederick. He was born on October the 26th, 1874 in Berlin, Ontario, Canada. He received his B.A. at McMaster College, 1895. The following 3 years he studied at Chicago before going to Clark, where he received his Ph.D. in 1900. He spent 1 year in postdoctoral research at the University of Berlin, 1905-6. His first teaching experience was at the Morgan Park Academy in Illinois, 1897-8. From 1900 to 1909, he was Professor of Philosophy and Education at Baylor University, and from 1909 to 1941, he was Professor of Education at the University of Texas. He was Holland Foundation Lecturer at the Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary in 1935, and 1955. In 1947 and 1948, he lectured at the Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. The Reconstruction of the Kindergarten, Worcester, Massachusetts, J. H. Orpha, 1900, 58 pages. Christianity and Education, Dallas, Texas, Baptist General Convention of Texas, 1915, 298 pages. Education in Texas, Source Materials, Austin, Texas, University of Texas Press, 1921, 963 pages. The Development of Education in Texas, New York, Macmillan, 1925, 354 pages. A Study of the Financing of Public Junior Colleges in Texas, with Benjamin Pittenger, Austin, Texas, University of Texas Press, 1931, 80 pages. The Development of Modern Education in Theory, Organization and Practice, with C. F. Arrowwood, New York, Prentice Hall, 1934, 922 pages, second edition, 1947. Graduate Theses and Dissertations in Education, Baylor, Southern Methodist, Texas Christian, Texas Tech, University of Texas, West Texas State Teachers College, a bibliography, with S. E. Frost, Jr., Austin, Texas, University of Texas Press, 1934, 77 pages. Early Protestant Educators, The Educational Writings of Martin Luther, John Calvin, and Other Leaders of Protestant Thought, New York, McGraw-Hill, 1935, 312 pages. The History and Philosophy of Education, Ancient and Medieval, with C. F. Arrowwood, New York, Prentice Hall, 1940, 966 pages. Reorganizing American Education for World Leadership, Austin, Texas, University of Texas Press, 1958, 74 pages. Evans, Medford Stanton. He was born on July 20th, 1934 in Kingsville, Texas. He received his BA from Yale University in 1955, and he has carried on further studies at New York University. He has worked in the field of journalism since 1955 with a primary interest in American education. He was assistant editor of The Freeman, 1955, assistant editor of National Review, 1955-6, managing editor of Human Events, 1956-9, publications director for the Intercollegiate Society of Individualists, 1956-9. Since 1959, he has been one of their trustees. He was chief editorial writer for Indianapolis News, 1959-60, and he received Freedom Foundation Awards for editorial writing, 1959, 1960. He has been editor of the Indianapolis News since 1960. Revolt on the Campus, Chicago, Regnery, 1961, 248 pages. Gallagher, Buell Gordon. He was born on February 4th, 1904 in Rankin, Illinois. He received his A.B. at Colton College in 1925 and his B.D. at Union Theological Seminary, New York City, 1929. He was ordained a Congregationalist minister prior to departing for England, where he studied at the London School of Economics, 1929-30. He received his Ph.D. from Columbia in 1939. From 1930 to 31, he was National Secretary of the Interseminary Movement. He was minister of a Congregational church in Passaic, New Jersey, 1931-3. And from 1933 to 1943, he was president of the Talladega College for Negroes in Alabama. He was professor of Christian ethics at the Pacific School of Religion, Berkeley, California, 1943-9, and educational consultant, United States Government, 1949-52. He was appointed president of City College in New York City in 1952. He consented to serve as first chancellor of the California State College system in 1961, but he resigned and returned to City College in 1962. American Cast and the Negro College, with the forewords by W. H. Kilpatrick, New York, Columbia University Press, 1938, 463 pages. Colour and Conscience, The Irrepressible Conflict, New York, Harper, 1946, 244 pages. Hall, Granville Stanley. He was born on February 1st, 1844 in Ashfield, Massachusetts. He attended the Ashfield and Williston Academics prior to entering Williams College, where he received his B.A. 1967. He abandoned seminary study in favour of graduate education in Germany at Bonn University, 1868-71. He instructed in literature and philosophy at Antioch College, 1872-6, and he received his Ph.D. at Harvard, 1878. He instructed in English, German literature and education at Harvard, 1876-82, and psychology and education at Johns Hopkins, 1882-8. Jonas Gilman Clark agreed to appoint him president of a new graduate university at Worcester, Massachusetts in 1888. Hall spent 1 year in Germany, 1888-9, prior to opening the new university in October 1889. Hall taught psychology full-time at Clark from 1893 until he retired as president in 1921. He died on April 24, 1924. Aspects of German Culture, Boston, J.R. Osgood, 1881, 320 pages. Hints toward a select and descriptive bibliography of education, with J.M. Mansfield, Boston, Heath, 1886, 309 pages. How to Teach Reading and What to Read in School, Boston, Heath, 1886, 40 pages. The Contents of Children's Minds on Entering School, New York, Kellogg, 1893, 56 pages. Adolescence, Its Psychology and Its Relations to Physiology, Anthropology, Sociology, Sex, Crime, Religion and Education. 2 volumes, New York, D. Appleton, 1904. Youth, Its Education, Regimen and Hygiene. New York, D. Appleton, 1906, 379 pages, 2nd edition, 1908. Aspects of Child Life and Education, et al., Boston, Ginn, 1907, 326 pages, 2nd edition, 1921. Educational Problems, 2 volumes, New York, D. Appleton, 1911. A Genetic Philosophy of Education, an epitome of the published educational writings of President G. Stanley Hall of Clark University, New York, Sturgis and Walton, 1912. Jesus Christ in the Light of Psychology, 2 volumes, Garden City, New York, Doubleday, Page & Co., 1917. Morale, the Supreme Standard of Life and Conduct, New York, D. Appleton, 1920, 377 pages. Recreations of a Psychologist, New York, D. Appleton, 1920, 336 pages. Life and Confessions of a Psychologist, New York, D. Appleton, 1923, 622 pages, 2nd edition, 1927. Harris, William Tory. He was born on September 10, 1835, on a farm near North Gillingley, Connecticut, after attending the Worcester and Andover academies. He was a student at Yale, 1854-6, but he did not like the curriculum. He taught secondary school in St. Louis, 1857-68. In 1858, Henry Brockmeyer introduced him to Hegel, and this event determined the balance of his intellectual career. He founded the Journal of Speculative Philosophy, with its Hegelian slogan, God, Freedom, and Immortality, in 1867, and he edited it until 1893. He was superintendent of schools in St. Louis from 1868 to 1880, and he issued 13 annual reports on St. Louis education. From 1880 to 1889, he instructed at the Concord, Massachusetts School of Philosophy. He was United States Commissioner of Education from 1889 to 1906. He died at Providence, Rhode Island, on November 5, 1909. Hegel's Doctrine of Reflection, New York, D. Appleton, 1881, 214 pages. Hegel's Logic, A Critical Exposition, Chicago, S. C. Grigg, 1890, 406 pages. The Theory of Education, Syracuse, New York, Bardeen, 1893, 54 pages. Horace Mann, Syracuse, New York, Bardeen, 1896, 34 pages. The Spiritual Sense of Dante's Divina Commedia, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1896, 193 pages. Psychologic Foundations of Education, New York, D. Appleton, 1898, 400 pages. Elementary Education, Nicholas Murray Butler, editor, Albany, New York, J. B. Lyon, 1900, 63 pages. Harrowtonian, Joseph. He was born on September the 18th, 1904 in Marash, Ottoman Empire. He studied at the American University of Beirut, Lebanon, 1919 to 23. Prior to entering the United States, where he is a naturalized citizen, he received his A.B. at Columbia in 1926 and his Ph.D. there in 1932. In the meantime, he had received his B.D. from Union Theological Seminary, New York City, in 1930 and entered the ministry. He was Assistant Professor of Biblical History at Wellesley College, 1932 to 1940, and he has been Professor of Systematic Theology at the McCormick Theological Seminary, Chicago, since 1940. At the centenary convocation of Knox College, September the 24th, 1958, he delivered a sermon, How to Hear the Gospel, which attracted wide attention. Piety versus Moralism, The Passing of the New England Theology, New York, Henry Holt, 1932, 329 pages. Wisdom and Folly in Religion, A Study of Chastened Protestantism, New York, Scribner's, 1940, 174 pages. Calvin, Commentaries, Philadelphia, Westminster, 1958, 414 pages. Hofstadter, Richard. Historian of politics, ideas, and education, he first made his reputation with a brilliantly written monograph on social Darwinism. He then turned to political history and political theory, but in recent years he has been increasingly concerned with the history of American education. He was born on August 6, 1916, in Buffalo, New York. He received his B.A. from the University of Buffalo in 1937. His graduate degrees are from Columbia, M.A. 1938, Ph.D. 1942. He first instructed in American history at Brooklyn College, 1940-1. He was Assistant Professor of American History at the University of Maryland, 1942-6. He has been on the history staff at Columbia since 1946, and in 1958-9 he was Visiting Professor of American History at Cambridge University, England. He received the Pulitzer Prize in History for his book, The Age of Reform, which appeared in 1956. Social Darwinism in American Thought, 1860 to 1915, Philadelphia University of Pennsylvania Press, 1944, 191 pages. Revised edition, Boston, Beacon Press, 1955, 248 pages. The Development and Scope of Higher Education in the United States, with C. Hardy, New York, Columbia University Press, 1952, 254 pages. The Development of Academic Freedom in the United States, with Walter P. Metzger, New York, Columbia University Press, 1955, 527 pages. Academic Freedom in the Age of the College, New York, Columbia, paperback, 1961. Horn, Hermann Harel, educator and philosopher, attempted to reconcile the idealistic philosophy of Hegel and the pragmatism of Peirce. He was born on November the 22nd, 1874, in Clayton, North Carolina. He received his A.B. from the University of North Carolina, 1895, and his graduate degrees from Harvard. A.M., 1897, Ph.D., 1899. He did 1 year of postdoctoral study at the University of Berlin, 1906-7. His first teaching was in the field of modern languages, University of North Carolina, 1894-6. He instructed in philosophy and education at Dartmouth, 1899-1909, and from 1909 to 1942 at New York University. He undertook extensive guest lecturing at seminaries and colleges, including Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Harvard Summer School of Theology, Martha's Vineyard Summer Institute, Columbia University, University of California at Berkeley, and Union Theological Seminary in New York City. The philosophy of education, being the foundation of education in the related natural and mental sciences, New York, Macmillan, 1904, 295 pages, revised edition 1927, 329 pages. The Psychological Principles of Education, a Study in the Science of Education, New York, Macmillan, 1906, 435 pages. Idealism in Education, or First Principles in the Making of Men and Women, New York, Macmillan, 1910, 183 pages. Storytelling, Questioning and Studying, 3 School Arts, New York, Macmillan, 1916, 181 pages. The Teacher as Artist, an Essay in Education as an Aesthetic Process, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1917, 62 pages. Modern Problems as Jesus Saw Them, New York, Association Press, 1918, 137 pages. Jesus, the Master Teacher, New York, Association Press, 1920, 212 pages. The New Education, New York, Abingdon, 1931, 280 pages. The Essentials of Leadership and Other Papers in Moral and Religious Education, Nashville, Tennessee, Cokesbury Press, 1931, 136 pages. The Democratic Philosophy of Education, New York, Macmillan, 1932, 547 pages, second edition, 1946. The Philosophy of Christian Education, New York, Revell, 1937, 171 pages. Hutchins, Robert Maynard. He was born on January the 17th, 1899 in Brooklyn, New York. He studied at Oberlin College, 1915-17, prior to spending 2 years with the United States Army Ambulance Service, 1917-19. He entered Yale after returning from Europe. From Yale, he received his A.B. 1921, A.M. 1922, and LL.B. 1925. He was Master of Literature and History at the Lake Placid School, 1921-3, and Administrative Secretary, Yale University, 1923-7. He was Lecturer in the Yale Law School, 1925-7, and Professor of Law, 1927-9. He was the Dean of the Yale Law School, 1927-9. In 1929, he was appointed President of the University of Chicago. He served first as president and then in the new office of Chancellor from 1929 to 1950. He was an associate director of the Ford Foundation 1951 to 4. Since 1954, he has been president of the Fund for the Republic, and he resides at Santa Barbara, California. Inaugural Address of Robert Maynard Hutchins, 5th President of the University of Chicago, November the 19th, 1929, Chicago. Chicago University Press, 1929, 15 pages. No Friendly Voice. Chicago, University of Chicago Press, 1936, 196 pages. The Higher Learning in America. New Haven, Connecticut, Yale University Press, 1936, 119 pages. The Conflict in Education in a Democratic Society. New York, Harper, 1953, 112 pages. James, William. He was born on January 11th, 1842 in New York City. Much of his youth was spent with his family in European travel, 1855 to 8, 1859 to 60. At the age of 18, he decided to become an artist, but he abandoned the idea the following year and began to study science at Harvard and the Lawrence Scientific School. He received his B.A. from Harvard in 1864 and entered the Harvard Medical School. He accompanied the Louis Agassiz expedition to Brazil, 1865 to 6, and he spent the year 1867 to 8 visiting universities in Germany. He received his M.D. from Harvard in 1869. He returned to teach at Harvard after further travel in 1872. He instructed in physiology from 1872 to 1882 and in psychology and philosophy from 1882 to 1907. He became a pragmatist and disciple of Peirce in 1890. He played a prominent part in an anti-Hegel philosophical society in England, and he joined E.L. Godkin of The Nation in 1898 for a public campaign against American annexation of the Philippine Islands, and, following annexation, on behalf of de-annexation, he maintained an extensive correspondence with German, French, Italian, and British scholars. During his last years, he spent some time in California. He died on August 26, 1910. Psychology, New York, Henry Holt, 1892, 478 pages, revised edition 1910. The Principles of Psychology, 2 volumes, New York, Henry Holt, 1890. Talks to Teachers on Psychology, New York, Henry Holt, 1899, 301 pages. The 1938 revised edition, Ibid, 238 pages, was edited and abridged by Dewey and Kilpatrick. Pragmatism, a new name for some old ways of thinking, New York, Longmans, Green, 1907, 308 pages. The Meaning of Truth, a sequel to Pragmatism, New York, Longmans, Green, 1909, 297 pages. Essays in Radical Empiricism, New York, Longmans, Green, 1912, 282 pages. Judd, Charles Hubbard. He was born on February the 20th, 1872, in Berryelly, Indiana. He received his A.B. from Wesleyan University in 1894 and his Ph.D. from Leipzig University in Germany, 1896. He was instructor of philosophy, Wesleyan, 1896 to 8, and assistant professor of psychology, New York University, 1898 to 1901, and University of Cincinnati, 1901 to 2. From 1902 to 1909, he was associate professor of psychology at Yale, and from 1909 to 1938, he was professor of education and chairman of the department at the University of Chicago. He resigned ahead of his scheduled retirement in 1938 to accept a New Deal appointment as Director of Education for the National Youth Administration. He held this position for 3 years. Genetic Psychology for Teachers, W.T. Harris, Editor, New York, D. Appleton, 1903, 329 pages. Second edition, 1911. Measuring the Work of the Public Schools, Cleveland, Ohio, Cleveland Foundation, 1916, 290 pages. Problems involved in standardizing state normal schools with S.C. Parker, Washington, D.C., Government Printing Office, 1916, 141 pages. The Evolution of a Democratic School System, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1918, 118 pages. Introduction to the Scientific Study of Education, Boston, Ginn & Co., 1918, 333 pages. The Psychology of Social Institutions, New York, Macmillan, 1926, 346 pages. Second edition, 1931. Third edition, 1936. The Psychology of Secondary Education, Boston, Ginn & Co., 1927, 545 pages. The Unique Character of American Secondary Education, English Lecture, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Harvard University Press, 1928, 53 pages. Problems of Education in the United States, in the Recent Social Trends series, New York, McGraw-Hill, 1933, 214 pages. Education and Social Progress, New York, Harcourt Brace, 1934, 285 pages. Education as Cultivation of the Higher Mental Processes, et al., New York, Macmillan, 1936, 206 pages. The Preparation of School Personnel, New York, McGraw-Hill, 1938, 151 pages. Educational Psychology, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1939, 566 pages. Teaching the Evolution of Civilization, New York, Macmillan, 1946. Kilpatrick, William Hurd, Progressive Educator. Dewey regarded him as his model disciple and remarked that progressive education and the work of Kilpatrick were synonymous concepts. Kilpatrick was always an aggressive fighter for his conception of education and culture. He was born in 1871 at White Plains, Georgia, the son of a Baptist minister. He reluctantly joined the Baptist Church in 1885, only to revolt from it a few years later. He received his A.B. in 1891 from Mercer University, a Baptist college at Mason, Georgia. He studied at Johns Hopkins in 1891 and 2 and returned to Mercer to receive his M.A. in 1892. He was a high school principal at Blakely, Georgia, 1892-5. He studied again at Johns Hopkins, 1895 and 6, and he was a high school principal at Savannah, Georgia, 1896 and 7, prior to joining the Mercer faculty in 1897 as professor of mathematics. In 1898, he attended the University of Chicago Summer School, and in 1900, the Summer School at Cornell, where he studied under Charles DeGarmo. He was acting president of Mercer University from 1902 to 1905. He was forced to leave Mercer in 1906 because of objections to his ideas. He was principal of a high school at Columbus, Georgia, 1906 and 7, prior to entering Teachers College of Columbia University as a graduate student in 1907. From 1907 to 1913, he was a part-time instructor at Teachers College and at the Pratt Institute. He received a full-time appointment at Teachers College in 1913, where it is estimated that he taught 35,000 students during his subsequent teaching career. He was usually in conflict with President Butler of Columbia. In 1926, he visited India and, in 1929, the Soviet Union, where he was warmly welcomed. He accepted the Soviet ideal of a supernatural government to be achieved by the employment of the national state in a revolutionary program. During the 1930s, he was involved in public controversies with Hutchins, Thorndike and William Randolph Hearst Sr. He retired from teaching on July 1st, 1938. The Dutch Schools of New Netherlands and Colonial New York, Washington, D.C., Government Printing Office, 1912, 239 pages. The Montessori System Examined, Boston, Houghton Mifflin, 1914, 71 pages. Froebel's Kindergarten Principles Critically Examined, New York, Macmillan, 1916, 217 pages. The Project Method, The Use of the Purposeful Act in the Educative Process, New York, Teachers College, Columbia, 1918, 18 pages. Foundations of Method, Informal Talks on Teaching, New York, Macmillan, 1925, 383 pages, 2nd edition, 1926, 3rd edition, 1935. Education for a Changing Civilization, New York, Macmillan, 1926, 143 pages, 2nd edition, 1927, 3rd edition, 1928, 4th edition, 1931. Education and the Social Crisis, A Proposed Program, New York, Live Right, 1932, 90 pages. The Educational Frontier, with Bode, Dewey et al., New York, Century, 1933, 325 pages. A Reconstructed Theory of the Educative Process, New York, Teachers College, Columbia, 1935. Remaking the Curriculum, New York, Newsom, 1936, 128 pages. The Art and Practice of Teaching, Bennington College Commencement Address, New York, William R. Scott, 1937, 14 pages. John Dewey as Educator, with J. L. Childs, New York, Progressive Education Association, 1939. Selfhood and Civilization, A Study in the Self-Other Process, New York, Macmillan, 1941, 243 pages. Intercultural Attitudes in the Making, with William Van Til, 9th Year Book, John Dewey Society, New York, Harper, 1947. Modern Education and Better Human Relations, New York, Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, 1949. A Philosophy of Education, New York, Macmillan, 1957.